you might just be the problem. Why, after so long, are we still having this discussion, this argument, this never ending argument, if you will? What's the argument? The argument is, are Christian artists ministers or are they creatives? One camp strongly believes that because they carry the banner of Christian, that they have a flock that they have to worry about. The other camp is saying, now, wait a minute. I understand they have influence. They are influencers for sure. They have responsibility. But I don't go to them like I would go to my pastor or to my local church or my local community. I think there's some nuance. I think there's room for the discussion. I'm okay for the discussion. I'm just not too sure why the argument, right? The almost one side is better than the other, or one side has a better holistic view. With so many different thoughts on this topic, we want to hear from you guys, your thoughts below in the comments. And let's go ahead and take a quick listen to what Aram thinks when it comes to this topic as well. So I like how you're talking about as an artist, you use your voice and everything. So we are in a spot that it seems like to just never ever go away as Christian artists. Okay, I don't know if you've been watching some stuff or seeing some stuff. So then just recently here, Caleb Gordon went on Ruslan's podcast on his channel. And the reason why is because, for those of you guys who don't know, Caleb had made mention that a Lecrae song featuring an artist from the mainstream was on there, was not a Christian song. And then it started the debate all over again. So let's talk about it. let's talk about that conversation. So where do you fall on? And I'm not saying it's got to be a binary thing, right? This is not a for or against. I'm not. Yeah. That's just not my personality, period. And if so, like, even if somebody tried to make it that way, I'm like, let's just devil's advocate, right? I just start pushing back, like, what do you think about this, though, right? So let's have this conversation. So where do you stand on a Christian's place to not only speak on certain topics, but who they speak with on those topics?
All right. Can you rephrase that just again?
Yeah. So the conversation where they were talking about is how a Christian artist should not have a secular artist on their records, right? But what that whole conversation, bro, got me going on was, okay, let's say, because the argument is, hey, you might have some confusion. You're going to expose your artist to them, not just their artist or their audience to you. And I get that, right? That's a valid conversation argument, right? But where I think of is someone like Tim Tebow, right? Steph Curry. These sports, these athletic, these professional sports guys, right, and girls who are of the faith, should we go, hey, you shouldn't be on that team. They're not all Christians. And you don't want to be mixed with them. That's where my mind goes on that, bro. So hopefully I kind of helped. But as far as that topic, how you feel on that, man?
Well, definitely, yeah. So I listened to the conversation, and I thought it was good. I would say this, and this is where I think I do agree with what Caleb shared. I do believe whether someone is making Christian hip hop or they're making hip hop from a Christian perspective, either of the two, I think it is essential that someone is plugged into a community, right? Like they're not in an island. They're not, doing this solo Christianity, right? I don't believe in solo Christianity. I don't think that's a real thing. It's always been about community, who you've been with. You can only practice Christianity with people, right? And so, like, even I'm thinking about like monastery monks and stuff like that. Like, you can be isolated and try to have a right relationship with God. However, if you look at the Latin, the Greek, and the Hebrew words of righteousness and justice, they're all the same word. We separated them in the English language, right? To try to make it distinct between our rightness with God being our piety and then our rightness with people, right? And we've separated that in the English language. However, in the Latin language, in the Spanish language, in the Hebrew language, and in the Hebrew language, the Greek language, they're all the same, righteousness and justice. And so it's essential to live out Christianity not only in silos but in with people, right? That's how you practice patience. That's how you practice joy and love and all those things, right? So that's one. I think it's essential that people are plugged in and they're on in community. You're held accountable, right? So you're not like a hip hop artist that is, or a Christian hip hop artist, and you're smoking weed, and like how Caleb was sharing, right? So I think it's essential to be plugged in, right?
Right.
So that's one. But then two, I understand the impact for both. So like when I first became a Christian at 17 years old, I want to say that, you know, guys like Lecrae and The Truth, Flame, like those guys and their music helped really disciple me, right?
Facts. Yeah.
But I understand that that was my appetite. I couldn't say that that would be the same for some of the guys that I grew up with, that I was trying to, you know, quote unquote, win over to the Lord. Like that wasn't their cup of tea, right? That wasn't something that they wanted to listen to. However, that was for me. So I understood that that was for my Christian growth, for me to learn more about the word, grow in theology, and ultimately practice that out in my relationship, right? With God and with people. But I do think it's also equally essential to have Christians that are, you know, quote unquote, infiltrating spaces that they should be in, right? Where there is, you know, darkness, right? Like, for example, like when Lecrae was taking a bunch of heat when he was, you know, putting out his church clothes projects, and he still is to this day. But I remember when this was earlier on, and I was a big advocate about this, because we look at missionaries that go across the country or go across overseas, and what they do is learn the people's language that they are in, the context that they're serving in. They learn the customs and the traditions. It's the very same sense that we as individuals are supposed to do, whether it's in hip hop or just in our communities that we're in. We're supposed to be missionaries. Jesus said, as the Father sent me, so I send you, John chapter 20, verse 21. And so we should be very contextual where we are and learn the language of people that we're trying to reach ultimately. And so whether that means being in spaces where, again, a non-believer would be at, that they wouldn't be at a church, for the hopes that you can be a light and bear witness there, I'm all for it. And then honestly, I think people have different opinions about, you know, making music with folks that are, you know, quote unquote secular, or, you know, not fully Christian, or however that sense is. I can't speak for Lecrae and his position on those things.
Right.
But what I would say is just, again, I think it is essential that Christians are making music for people who, you know, wouldn't listen to the good news at a church setting, right? You know, and so to me, like, I have a desire to, one, make music that is helpful for the edification of the Christian body, but then I also want to make music that, you know, a bunch of the guys that I mentor that don't go to a church, but that they would be interested in listening to that music and would hear the message that I would bring through that. And so I understand both sides of that spectrum. I don't get why there's so much tension between both sides of the spectrum, because again, what are we doing, right? Like, again, we can sit in a church and we could, you know, babysit other people's children and their, you know, and stuff like that. And we just wait for Jesus to come back. Or we could really also, you know, be intentional about the things that we're doing. We want to help discipleship, and those that are interested. You can only be discipled if you want to be discipled. Right. So you pour into them and you build them up. But then those that you are called to reach, that means those that are not interested initially, you have to do something to engage them. And so, again, it's an interesting conversation. I try not to, for me, on my sake, like, I don't waste a lot of head energy with that, because I understand where I'm at on that. And I hope to try to speak to folks, but again, it's touchy on both sides, and so again, I don't understand that. But again, hopefully, you know, what I shared was a little bit about how I stand in that conversation.
Yeah, no, it's good. So you're not saying binary, you know, and or you're saying and both. Both are needed, and I think, honestly, bro, I think that's where my frustration is with that conversation too, where I'm like, freaking, why is it with Christians? Why, like, it's a Peter and Paul conversation. Like, we even use that as a reference a lot of times with other similar topics. But I'm like, but why is it when it comes to, especially Christian hip hop, why is it in that conversation it can't be oh, it's a Peter Paul situation. You know, I have some friends where their lane is, I want to serve the church. Like, that is my heart. That is my calling. That is just everything that is about me. I want to press towards church and or church events only, right?
Yeah.
Amen. Glory to God. I also have friends who are like, hey, I know, again, like we said, they're not ever going to come to church. They're not going to want to receive it from anyone there. So I'm going to fill myself up, have community, have accountability, because somehow we assume that people don't have accountability because they're in these other circles. We just assume that, you know, we're going to be their online accountability, which is the dumbest thing in the world that people, whatever. Anyways, but I got friends who are like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take the word to them, and I'm going to try to be that light, because a light shines even brighter in the darkness, right? But yeah, bro, I'm with you. I think with that conversation, part of the reason why I'm so frustrated by it is because of I think it's the and both. It's like, okay, that's fine. But then where everybody is about, well, what do you call it then? You know, I have a friend of mine who he goes, I don't freaking care what you call it. You're going to call, if I call it whatever this is, but it sounds like this, the audience is going to call it like that anyways. Like, it doesn't matter what you as an artist call your music, your audience is going to determine that. However, depending on which audience you're talking to, they might have even their own rendition of it. And I think that's where, bro, where the unity in Christianity struggles so much, because we want to like define it and put it in this specific thing that works for that denomination, you know?
So true.